Hey guys, it's good to see you all here. I'm glad to be back with you tonight. Hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. I was noticing, let me see what you guys are talking about real quick. I was noticing you guys are talking right before I came on about the HCA again, the Holy Guardian Angel. And this is one of those things, people always find this kind of stuff infinitely fascinating in the beginning. Well, first let me say that all of these things that seem confusing, all of these things that you have a lot of questions about in the very beginning, if you just consistently do the work, almost every single question that you have will answer itself. All you have to do is do the work. Whether that question is about the HCA, whether that question is about crossing the abyss, whether it's a technical question of some sort. If someone will ask me, for example, what order do you invoke this in? Or, how do you do this? 9 times out of 10, if you just start doing it, you're going to figure it out for yourself. That's just how it works. It's also the state of confusion you have. All these questions that you have, that's always going to be the case. Like I said, if you just do the work, the questions will answer themselves, but that doesn't mean you will always have questions, because honestly, for every single question that you get the answer to, you will have 5 more questions. And we all want someone who's just going to be able to give us the answers all at one time. But some of the stuff you're just not going to be able to understand until you actually get to that point, get to that stage. We talked a lot about the HCA in the last video, how it's, as above, so below, as within, so without. It is an external experience as well as an internal experience. It's both. It's 2 different things, but they're mirrors of each other. But that's still, knowing that on an intellectual level, you can read books about that, or, people can talk to you about it or whatever it is, and you're still not going to understand it. You may think that you understand it. You may get the feeling that you understand it, but there's a difference. Remember in the Matrix, whenever Morpheus tells Neo, there's a difference in walking the path and knowing the path. There's a difference in understanding these things on an intellectual level because you read a book about them, or because somebody told you about them, versus direct firsthand experience. The only way you are going to obtain direct firsthand experience is by consistently applying yourself to the work. I wanted to touch on a couple things before we get started. One is I posted something yesterday about a course by Ricardo Villanova, who is a teacher in Italy. He's actually the tutor of the man who was my tutor. The reason, and I'm going to take this course as well. So, I'm telling you guys that if this is something that if this path is something that you're interested in, you're going to want to take this course. I'm going to be taking it, so I'll be there with you. But the reason that I'm saying take it if you have the means, if you're capable, if you have the time, if you have the money, and it's not that much money. I think it's like 49 euros, something like that. I'm not sure exactly how many dollars that translates into, but it's not, some ungodly amount of money. It's a relatively inexpensive seminar. But the reason that I posted it is because he talks about things, he teaches about things that you are not going to find in many other places. You're not going to find the stuff he teaches. I have never found anyone else other than me who talks about the things that he talks about. honestly, when you're looking at most of the world of magic, you're talking about really low level stuff. You're talking about, like, a lot of people will rehash the stuff that you find in, the same books over and over. Like, it's going to be a bunch of, people arguing about, like, Crowley stuff over and over and over. Or, like Witchcraft 101 or that sort of thing. Never have I come across anyone else who teaches a lot of what up until now has been very, very secret information, to be honest. Like, you did not get access to this stuff unless you belonged to a lodge or an order that had, like, a very old lineage, what they call apostolic succession, where you've had a very long line of, like, a teacher transmitting it to a student, and that student becoming a teacher and transmitting it to their student, and that student becoming a teacher and transmitting it to their student, on and on through time. And it's they call it apostolic succession because, like when Jesus passed on information to the disciples, they went and passed on information to their disciples, and they went and passed on information to their disciples. But there was an unbroken lineage of this information being passed all the way back from a source that was a very, very elevated teacher. That's the case with this tradition. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that he's talking about, this particular course or this particular seminar, one of the reasons that I'm advising people to take it is because it covers some of the same stuff that we've been talking about on here over and over for at least the past year. And what I mean by that is, most, and this is what I mean too about people who rehash the same things over and over. In magic, you find a lot of people talking about planetary magic. You can invoke Jupiter, or you can invoke angels of Jupiter, or you can invoke a god associated with Jupiter, or you can invoke Hesed on the tree for this purposes, like generosity or growing your financial prosperity or whatever it is. Or, you can invoke Saturn for this, or you can invoke Benavi, all very planetary-based stuff. But that will not free you from samsara. All of those types of magic, planetary magic, is still within the wheel of samsara. So you can get really, really, really great at manifesting things. You can reach a point where, like even before I got out of prison, I kind of reached a stage where if I did magic to manifest something and it didn't, I would be more shocked if it didn't manifest than if it did. Just because you learn how this works, but that will not free you from the wheel of samsara. That will not, we're going through this constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, birth, death, and rebirth, birth, death, and rebirth, over and over and over. And if all you're doing is planetary magic, you're basically kind of just sustaining that. You're kind of like running on a wheel. If you get to the point where you are developing what people call really great karma, then all you're doing is being born in a high place over and over, manifesting a good life the next time. But it doesn't free you from this eternal cycle of incarnating into this realm over and over. What he was describing, even in the short video, where he's going beyond planetary magic. Remember, we've talked about this on here many times, how this is you. This is what I mean, again, going back to what we were just saying just a couple of minutes ago about the HCA, as well as what the last video was about when we're talking about the HCA, how it's an internal thing and it's also an external thing. This is an internal model of you. It's also an external model of not the physical levels of the universe, but the energetic levels of the universe. Just like there are levels and layers to your aura, so there are also levels and layers to the universe's aura. So you see this whole section right here. This is the Earth in the middle, which represents your physical body. Here are the planets around it, all the way until you get to here. All this whole little section in here, this is all planetary magic. Those represent different levels and different layers of your aura. Well, when you get, and that's what people are working with when they're doing planetary magic a lot of times, that's what they're working with right in here. It's all staying in here. But you notice you got this whole section out here that isn't being approached, isn't being used, isn't being explained, isn't being touched. Well, you see this section, this one right here, the first one above the planets, that's the wheel that contains, that's the level that contains the 12 constellations of the zodiac, the one with the stars in it. The one right above that, that's the 36 deacons of the zodiac, the 36 angels of the deacons of the zodiac. If you took each sign of the zodiac and split it into 3 equal parts, each of those 3 equal parts would be called a deacon. And there is an angel that presides over each one of those. The next level, that is where you find, if you took the deacons of the zodiac and cut each one of those in half, you come up with 72. And there is an angel that presides over each of those 72 portions of the zodiac. And that's where we get the angels of the Shem operation. Well, the reason for studying astrology, the reason for paying attention to, like your birth sign, times that people were born, things like that, is because, you know how I said this is levels of your aura? This is layers of you internally, but as above, so below, as within, so without, just like the HGA. This is also the levels of the universe's aura. So when you are born, you start out here. Now this right here, this top, this is beyond, this is the Empyrean. The very last line, the very last circle here, this is the Empyrean. The Empyrean means the mind of God. That corresponds to Kether on the tree of life. Kether is beyond all correspondences. It is what lies behind even the zodiacal realms. Well, there's even more beyond that. You know, a lot of times now you hear people talking about the tree of life almost as if it's the be all and the end all. You know, you hear about the different grades that correspond to the different spheres on the tree and all of that sort of stuff. And we look at it as if a person attains the grade of ipsissimus, which is where Kether is on the tree, and how they say someone who reaches Kether, someone who attains the grade of ipsissimus, is beyond the understanding of all those below. Well, once you get to the grade of ipsissimus, you realize that you have only taken the first step in a process. The tree of life is not the be all and the end all. The tree of life is the beginning. When you reach Kether, you realize that yes, you've completed the great work. No, you will not necessarily reincarnate into this realm again, although you can. And people incarnate for a bunch of different reasons. Some people may incarnate because they choose to be bodhisattvas. They want to come back here over and over and help other people complete the great work. They want to help other people break out of samsara. But you may have people incarnate for the simple reason that they owe someone in this world a favor, or they made someone in this world a promise. So they come back here for no other reason than to repay that favor. It could be a spiritual favor, it could be a material favor, but they feel like they need to come back and fulfill their word to repay this person a favor. You may have someone come back because they made someone a promise. You know, they promised someone that they would help them with something, or they promised, you know, it could be a promise for anything. So they come back because they feel an obligation to fulfill that promise. People could come back for a lot of different reasons, but you don't necessarily have to. But the reason I'm talking about the fact that even when you reach the stage of ipsissimus, whenever you are at Kether, there are other levels beyond this. And those are levels when you're getting into pure, absolute, indescribable states of energy. Even when you're talking about Kether, you're basically talking about God. But then you'll hear people, like when I was a little kid, we used to say all the time, we would say, well, where did God come from? And people would say, don't ask that. Don't say things like that. That's blasphemous. When I was a little kid, that almost drove me crazy for a time. Like I would ask my mom all the time, if everything came from God, then where did God come from? And she would say, like, you're not supposed to question that. You're not supposed to ask that. Well, once you go into these other higher realms that are even beyond Kether, you will understand even where God came from. The thing is, when you are born, when you come into this world, you come into it through stages. Now, remember we were talking about an alchemical month and how an alchemical month is basically 40 days, give or take. It's not exact, but it takes you, when you die, it will take you about 40 days to go through the entire death process. It will take you about 40 days to completely untangle from the physical body, and then untangle from the etheric body, and then untangle from the astral body, and then untangle from the mental body. When you die, here's where you are when you're alive. That's your physical body. You have all these different levels of energy. You descended down. Now, not internally. We're talking externally for a second. When you were born, you had to descend down through all these different levels or layers of the universe, of the universe's aura, before you were born into the physical world. Well, whenever you began that descent, you started your process by coming through a window. Think of it as a window. Realistically, it's not a window, it's a constellation. You began your descent down into the physical world at a specific point. If you are born, like say me, I'm a Sagittarius, I began my descent through the constellation of Sagittarius, down through all of these other forms until I reach the physical body. And then whenever you die, you'll go back out pretty much the same way. Or you'll go out in whatever time you die. This is the sort of stuff that Ricardo Villanova is what he talks about. The reason that I tell people to take his classes is because even though we're sitting here talking about it now, he explains this stuff a lot more eloquently than I ever could. He describes it in a way that's really simple and easy to understand, and is going to add a lot to what we're talking about. Let me see. Tyrell says, does this happen entirely before birth, or is the process still happening as children become conscious? Well, it happens entirely before birth, whenever you merge with the physical form. Whenever whenever you're in your mother's womb and you merge into the physical form, that's when you've incarnated into the physical realm again. You've still got other things going on after you're born, but for the most part, your descension into the world of physical matter is complete once you're in your mother's womb. At any rate, that's why I am encouraging people to take his class. Now he may even he's coming to the U.S. Yes, Andrew. Andrew, that's a very good question. Andrew says, does the constellation you descend through hold specific significance? For example, Pisces versus Aries. It absolutely does. And it will determine a lot. Everything, energy will always take on qualities and characteristics depending upon what it comes in contact with. So say, for example, we're all giving off energy all the time. It's coming off of you like heat. Just like heat is coming off of you, you're also emitting energy. This is why when you walk through places like Times Square, they call Times Square the crossroads of the universe. Just because when you are in Times Square, you are going to see people from every race, every religion, every nationality, every walk of life. They are all there in Times Square, and they are all giving off tons of energy. So if you think of it as above Times Square, you have a big cloud of energy floating that's made up of all the energy of the people there. And that's what an egregore is. An egregore is, think of it as like a form of energy that is made of a bunch of people's energies who are contributing to it. The energy that you are contributing is going to be stained or tainted or flavored with a lot of different things. Like, for example, the emotions that you're feeling. If someone is angry, then that's going to be inherent within the energy they're giving off. If someone is depressed, that's going to be in the energy. If someone is filled with anxiety, that's going to be in the energy. If someone is happy, that's going to be in the energy. If someone is experiencing love or lust, that's going to be in the energy. Energy also takes on qualities and characteristics of things it touches, of places. This is why every place has its own distinct energy, its own flavor or quality of energy. When you descend down through a particular constellation, you take on the flavor of that particular constellation. That's why they'll say that certain people who are born under certain signs exhibit certain qualities or behave in certain ways. It's not like a complete and absolute formula, like you can say every Sagittarius does this, because we're all different. But everyone who descends through Sagittarius will take on certain flavors of energy. Let's see what you guys are talking about. The Baked Nurse says, is it just random or do we choose which constellation? Most people cannot choose. Most people will come through the constellation based upon their karma, based upon their desire, based upon the lessons that they have already learned, the lessons that they need to learn, the lessons that they're coming into the world to master this time. All of those things can influence which one you come through. Some people, once you break the chains which bind you to the stars, when you're doing this work, the way you're going to go back up this chain, you have to do this while you are alive. You cannot do this while you are dead. It has to be while you are in the flesh. You begin when in ceremonial magic, this is the path of magic. You begin, since this is you in the hardcore flesh and blood physical world, earth, that's why you begin your practice with working with the elements, earth, air, fire, and water. That's what you're equilibrating, mastering, perfecting, and purifying in the first level. Second level, you're going to start doing planetary work. That's when you're working with the hexagrams, when you're invoking the planets, when you're invoking the spheres on the tree of life, all of that kind of stuff. Most people in magic never go above that. Most like books on magic, people out there teaching magic, they don't understand even that you have to go above the planets. You have to ascend beyond them. You have to do the astrological work. So whenever you're doing planetary work, what you're doing is basically propelling your way back up through these layers. The same ones that you came down through when you were born, the same ones that you will go up through when you die. You are doing it with your consciousness while you are still alive. You're going back up. When you reach here, you still have to go through these last three, or when you die, you will just come right back down through those. You have to get to what the level that lies right beyond Kether. Even if you are in Kether, you will come back. You know how they say in magic that there is a constant current of energy always flowing from Kether flowing from Malkuth up to Kether and flowing from Kether back down into Malkuth? That's the Ouroboros. It's this constant circuit. You're going through all of those over and over. Once you take one step beyond Kether, you have broken free of that eternal cycle. Then you're free to go back into it if you want to, come out of it when you want to, or you can do a lot of other things. But like I said, you're not going to find most people talking about this in magic because they don't understand it. You know, most people think, just like Westerners who study Buddhism, they think that, you're going to break free of samsara just by developing good karma. Nobody ever taught that. The Buddha didn't teach that. Jesus didn't teach that. No one taught that you can break free of samsara by developing good karma. Now, you can obtain a good rebirth through developing good karma, but you're not going to break free of that cycle. Mercury says, what would you do once you break free? You could do a lot of things. You could either, like I said, you could come back here and help other people. You could choose to merge back with the source that everything came from and to which everything will one day return. You could, dissolve back into the source that everything came from that's even beyond God. If you choose to do so, you can go back into that. That's right. You can also create your own universe and dwell within it. You know how I always talk about when God created the universe, that doesn't mean he made it like a painter creating a painting or a sculptor creating a sculpture where at the end of the process, they're separate from the piece. The artist is one thing and the piece is one thing. When we say God created the universe, we mean that this energy, this intelligence poured itself into the dimensions of time and space. God became the world. God became us. You can do that very same thing. You can create a universe and dwell within every sentient being within it. Okay, I'm going to stop for now because I want to read you guys some of the stuff that's in here in Kabbalah for health and wellness. And one of the things I wanted to read you tonight is about teachers. Because when I read this, I thought this was really, really important. This was a lesson that I had to learn in my life, and it's a lesson that everyone else will have to learn in their lives at some point. It's even considered a kind of test. There will come a time when you realize that your teacher is human, when your teacher is not perfect, and how you respond in that moment can, to a very large degree, determine what will happen on your magical path. A lot of people from that point on quit. The thing is, when you experience crossing the abyss, when you experience the dissolution of the self, when you experience yourself as the consciousness that looks through the eyes of every man, woman, and child on this planet, when you know that you are everyone that you see, you will still remain an individual person. You were meant to be an individual person. You will not be the same person that you were before that experience. It will change you in deep and profound ways, but you will still live in the world as an individual. You know, energy takes on the flavor of a lot of things. You are who you are for a reason. God wanted to be you for a reason. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, said that we are all apertures through which God is looking. You know, basically we are holes through which God is looking at the world. And every hole that God looks through, it sees different things. You know, think of it as like there's a big wooden fence surrounding a construction site. And you go around and you look through the hole in this fence, you're going to see things from a different angle, a different perspective. That's what God is doing. We are the holes that God is looking through. It doesn't want to see everything from the same angle, from the same perspective. That would defeat the entire purpose of us coming here, of it coming here. So even after you experience yourself as God, you will still function in the world as an individual. This is like that Zen saying, before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. And after enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. But this is about teachers. So I'm going to read this to you. And the reason I love this so much is because this is something that a lot of us already know on some level. But again, just like with Ricardo Villanova, how I'm talking about how he articulates things much more eloquently than I can. Mark Stavish in this book describes this process and this experience in a much more articulate way, a much more eloquent way than I can. In traditional esoteric studies, a student would either be associated with a teacher for a long period of time or undergo a series of initiations in a structured setting. Between these initiations, instructions would be given by a series of teachers specializing in particular areas. So what he's talking about there is basically magic is passed on in one of two ways. Either you have a teacher who's teaching you, and they had a teacher, and they had a teacher, and they had a teacher, and it's this lineage that's being passed down. They call it a current. Each person in this lineage who has received, who is part of this apostolic succession, is what's known as a current bearer. They have had this current of energy passed to them, and they will pass it on one day to someone else to create this unbroken lineage. And whenever that happens, whenever you are part of something like that, almost all of your learning will come from one person. That doesn't mean you won't necessarily come in contact with other people and learn from other books and other sources and other classes and things like that. Like even if I have done an initiation ritual for you, I'm still telling you, take this course from Ricardo Villanova. Look online and see the classes that Mark Stavish is teaching. So even if I am your primary teacher, you will still learn from these other people. That's one way. The other way is through an order or a lodge. When you are part of a traditional, a real order or a lodge, you don't have one primary teacher. It'll be more like you will learn people that are associated with the order. You will learn, say for example, alchemy from this person. You'll learn ritual work from this person. You may learn astrology from this person. You may learn tarot from this person. So you'll learn a bunch of things from a bunch of different people as you go through this initiation process, because everyone doesn't know. Each person has their own special thing. With the breakdown of traditional teaching practices, the rarity of qualified instructors, and the lack of operating lodges for initiatic instruction, students must go from class to class, center to center, and seminar to seminar, attempting to gather enough information to move forward on their path. From these experiences, they cobbled together their own version of the teacher and hoped someday to find him or her in the flesh. This is in some ways no different than what occurred in the Eastern schools, where students would travel for years before settling on one person as their teacher to guide them on the path. So he's saying in there also, you've kind of had in the modern world a breakdown for the most part of these traditions. You know, like I said, you're going to find very few people who are truly transmitters of an old lineage. You know, it's mostly people who, and it's, you know, it's like everybody's got to start somewhere, but it's mostly people who just decided, like, okay, I'm going to create a lodge or an order or whatever. You're not going to find very many of these old school teachers and traditions anymore. So people are just doing the best that they can by taking a ton of different classes, reading a ton of different books, going to a ton of different workshops, all that kind of stuff. Just because with the way the world is now, you almost have to do that these days. While the idea of a single, all-knowing, perfect teacher is enticing, it is for the most part an infantile fantasy born of unresolved Freudian issues. So what he's saying there, basically what this means, and this is, I see this a lot in magic. You will sometimes even have people that get really, really upset. You know how when you're a little kid, you look at your parents and you think of your parents as being all-knowing? You think they know everything. You know, my dad's 25 years old. He knows everything there is to know. He's always going to make sure everything's okay. And then one day you realize, my dad doesn't know everything. My mom is a dumbass. You know, how does she not know this? You will go through that same experience to some degree with your teacher. I have with mine, with every teacher that I've ever had in one way or another. You reach a point where you realize they don't know everything. They're imperfect. They're flawed. So when he's talking about, like, whenever you realize that about your parents, that is one of the mile markers in your process of coming of age, of becoming an adult, of growing up. It's another one of your mile markers on the path of magic. Something in you is cracked open. You know, you're seeing the world from a bigger perspective. Even in Eastern schools, where the teacher is looked upon as an enlightened being capable of doing no wrong, it is still understood that this may not be the case, and a certain amount of leeway is given in personal areas. The personality of the teacher is put aside, pending grievous misconduct, and the quality of the teaching is what is considered. And that is very, very important. Your teacher is always going to have flaws. Maybe you catch them on a bad day and you see them snap at someone. You know, they've got a short temper that day. Or maybe it could be anything at all that you see your teacher one day exhibit behaviors that are less than exemplary. It will always happen. Maybe you see your teacher suddenly who seems to know everything and is in such command of normal daily life, and all of a sudden one time you see them get scared, or you see them get really stressed out. You see them get angry, whatever it is. It's because they're still human. You know, they're still going to have, but, you know, they're talking about putting that aside. Basically, what you're supposed to look at, what you're supposed to take into consideration is this person giving me information? Is this person giving me knowledge? And is this person teaching me things that I've seen from firsthand experience is having an effect on me, is having an effect on the world, is allowing me to change things? Is this person giving me information that is allowing me to reach further down this path? That's the most important thing. That doesn't mean just excuse anything and everything. That doesn't mean, it's okay to, if they're a complete and absolute asshole and just a foul, vile person, maybe it's a vile person who just read a bunch of books. You'll be able to tell if this person has actually put these things into practice in their own life, if it's changed them. You'll be able to tell that. It'll be like when you do see them exhibiting human characteristics, it'll be acceptable. It'll be, you'll just realize, oh, it's a person. You're not talking about someone who's malicious and just an asshole. Yeah, Andrew says this seems also applicable to teachers of the past like Crowley. Absolutely. When we look at the idea of the teacher in Western esotericism, we see a great deal of discussion on the topics of the inner teacher, the inner master, the holy guardian angel, and similar terms. The inner master is none other than our own enlightened consciousness. When we first encounter it, this aspect of our psyche often appears as a separate individual, because while it is always present, we are not always aware of it. As such, we are separate from it in our daily life. When the Great Awakening occurs, often called the alchemical marriage, we unite with this function and two become one. We still function as an individual in the world, but are aware of our fundamental unity with others and with creation. That's what we were talking about earlier. Once again, or what we were talking about in the last video about how my brain went blank. What was it? Oh, how when you first attain contact with the HGA, there's a difference in establishing contact versus the union, versus the alchemical marriage. When you first establish contact, you're going to start receiving information. You're going to start receiving guidance, and it will come to you in a way that you would swear that this thing is separate from you. This thing is outside you. When it happened to me, there is nobody in this world that could have convinced me that I was not talking to God, that God was not walking with me and talking to me 24 hours a day, giving me things, showing me things that I would have had no way of knowing on my own. Like I said, I dropped out of school when I was in 9th grade. I was receiving stuff that there was no way in hell that I should have known, things I have never come in contact with, stuff like about the precession of the equinoxes and all this sort of thing. There is nothing anyone could have done that would have convinced me that I was not talking to God and that it was separate from me. But there did come a day after invoking it nonstop, inflaming myself with prayer, when I experienced the alchemical wedding, when me and what I had been talking to as something outside myself merged into one. And then I knew that it really had been another part of me, that I had been establishing contact with a higher part of me. All of these things will lead one to the other. once you establish contact with the HGA, if you keep working with it, if you keep invoking it, if you keep praying to it, if you keep talking to it, if you keep interacting with it, there will come a day when you eventually experience the merging. And that will lead you to the next step of the process, which is crossing the abyss. All of these things are like links in a chain that you will be led through one after the other. All you have to do, just like I was saying when we first started, is keep doing the work. If you consistently do this work, your questions will be answered. Your questions will be answered, and you will be given entirely new questions. All authentic spiritual teachers are attempting to stimulate this inner awakening in us in some manner. They act as a reflection of what is possible for us, of what we are becoming and growing into. However, not all teachers are fully illuminated, and therefore they are limited in what they can pass on, just as students are limited in what they can learn due to their own weakness and failings. What he's saying there, when we're talking about things like apostolic succession, a teacher cannot pass on to you something that they have not had passed on to them. Most teachers are not going to be able to teach you how to do something that they themselves have not done. You know, there's a difference, like I said, in reading something in a book versus having experienced it firsthand. If all someone has done is read it in a book, they're not going to be able to pass you what you need in order to allow you to experience it. Same way with students. It's talking about a lot of people. You know, we all have our own hangups. We all have our own issues. We all have our own problems, and there are things within each of us that prevent us from, even if you have a teacher that is at the very absolute highest levels of realization and illumination, we each have issues that make it where we can only receive as much of their blessing as we're capable of accepting. Modern students are demanding and immature in their attitude towards spiritual work. Fantasies of instant attainment fill their heads, and the basic role of ethical and moral teachings, coupled with the work of memorizing rituals, scriptures, prayers, and traditional languages and words, does not interest them. Many even see it as an obstacle to the path. In short, they seek to have what they want, when they want it, and they do not feel any obligation to their teacher, community, or the tradition. They have paid their entrance fees, and that is sufficient. And that's absolutely true in modern times. And it's not just students of magic. It's not just students in esoteric traditions. It's almost all of society in a certain way. We've all, and I include myself in this, you know, to some extent, we all suffer from this. We're entitled. We believe that we are entitled to receive things just because we exist. You know, just because, you know, we paid someone. And I'll give you an example. I've had people that I've actually had to tell before. You know, they think just because, you know, they're paying you that somehow they're entitled to your time, your attention, your energy, everything. I've had to tell people before, I don't think I'm the teacher for you. I don't think I'm what you're looking for. I think it would be better for you to, you know, look elsewhere. Look for someone who you're going to be more suited to. Just because there was such a level of entitlement that I couldn't get through it. I couldn't break through it to even get them to understand what I was saying. Uh, I don't know why in the modern age that is. I read something one time that said hard times create, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was phrased. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. It's like this endless cycle. You know, they call it yugas in yoga. In Hinduism, they talk about how we're in the Kali Yuga, which is like the most degenerate of the ages, where people don't have any respect for like the old traditions or old knowledge or any of that kind of stuff. And maybe it's true. Maybe we are in the Kali Yuga. Maybe that's part of it. Why everyone has this sense of entitlement. I can't tell you, but I can tell you that it's absolutely true. Such attitudes, while prevalent, are an obstacle to true attainment, as the tradition cannot be written in a book and sold. That is just the seed. The true plant and its fruit, illumination, are won only by diligent work and a humbling of the self before the light of the master, be it within or without. And that's exactly what it comes down to. You have to approach this tradition. You have to approach this lineage. You have to approach this information. You have to approach teachers with an open heart, with a willingness to learn, and with a genuine desire for knowledge and illumination. Most people don't have that. You know, it's like that Zen story about the guy who goes to the Zen Buddhist, and they sit down to tea, and he's asking the Zen Buddhist, who's a Zen master, he's asking him to become his teacher. And while he's talking, the Zen master starts pouring a cup of tea, and the guy's going on, and he's talking about, you know, I studied with this master, and I've been to this school, and I went to this temple, and I've done this kind of meditation, and I've been part of these practices. And the whole time he's going on, the Zen master just keeps pouring the tea and pouring the tea and pouring the tea, and the cup starts overfilling and running all over the floor until the guy says, "What are you doing? The cup is full." And the Zen master says, "Exactly. You're the cup. You have to empty out what is within you before anything else can go in." And you come across that all the time in spiritual work. People don't want to. They come with this perception that on some level they're already perfect, and all they have to do is build upon that perfection. Or if their knowledge is already perfect, as if they already know what all there is to know, and all they have to do is build on that knowledge. You know, used to in the old days, in the really, really old schools, you know, whenever people would be seeking initiation into these traditions, a lot of times people would crawl in a procession. They would crawl on their hands and knees across the ground until they got to the temple to show how much they wanted it, how much they were willing to go through. Traditionally, in old school Zen monasteries, you would be ejected 3 times, not always in a gentle, easy way either. First time you come to the temple, you knock on the door, you say, "I want to study here. I want to practice here. I want to be your student." They say, "No, get lost." And they close the door in your face. You have to sit there and wait. You may sit there and wait all night long. The next day, the door opens, they come out, and they say, "I thought I told you to get the hell out of here. Speed on, beat it." Close the door again. You still have to sit there. Maybe you're going to sit there for a whole nother day waiting. There are even stories where they will come out with a kendo stick and start hitting you and telling you, "We told you get out of here. You are not acceptable. You're not being allowed admittance into this temple. and they will throw you physically out of the temple. You were supposed to do whatever you could to stay. When they're trying to throw you out, you're supposed to grab onto the post and hug it as tight as you can. Do not let go. While they're trying to tear you off and throw you out, you have to show how dedicated you are to receiving this information, to studying, thereby hugging this post. If you just give up and quit and go off, then that's it. That's the end of it. But they would actually, if they couldn't tear you off the post, they would whack you with kendo sticks to try to make you let go so that they could toss you out. You had to really show that you were determined, that you really wanted to receive this information, that you were serious about it. We're getting close to an hour. Let me go on instead of rambling on. Let me see. If you are not willing to do scales, then you will not be able to learn to play a musical instrument. If you are not willing to draw endless circles and squares, then the subtleties of fine drawing will never be yours. If you are not willing to be still, listen, follow advice, and discipline yourself in your practice, then the desire for magical powers, illumination, or the ability to heal are just egotistical pipe dreams, or worse, fantasies that keep you from living a meaningful life in the world, even if it is not a very spiritual one. It is important that we adopt the proper attitude toward ourself and our studies, toward life and toward our teachers and the tradition. This attitude can be summed up in one word: gratitude. If we are to awaken to our inner master, then we must find 5 physical teachers to stimulate our inner awakening. Each teacher represents a reflection of the inner master. And as such, we can look upon each of our teachers as a specific incarnation or embodiment of that particular skill and ideal. By doing this, we save ourselves and our teachers the burden of projection and psychological wish fulfillment so common in today's spiritual marketplace. Since no one person is seen as perfect and as being there solely to help us, or more likely in the pathological sense, meet our emotional and psychological needs, we reduce the risk of having unpleasant associations. And most people, whenever they talk about things, not just with a teacher, but also when people say they're looking for a spiritual community, what they really mean is that they are looking for someone to meet their emotional and psychological needs. And that's not what teachers are here for, and it's not what a community is here for. We're here to encourage each other in these practices and to pass on these practices and to help each other with information that others may not know. But this is not about meeting other people's emotional or psychological needs or fulfilling their projections or any of that sort of stuff. It's important, however, that we have someone whom we look to as embodying the totality of the tradition and who has demonstrated genuine gifts and inspired teachings, even if we do not look at this teacher as being a perfect master or some such thing. We simply need to recognize the important place and role this person has played for us in our spiritual growth and with assistance in the path of becoming. This is our primary teacher who will hold a special place in our heart as well as in our prayers and meditations. And I'm not going to go on for a long time, but I do want to get to what this is leading up to. We then need teachers who embody the practical expression of the elements as they relate to the tradition. No title need be given them, although it is easy to see how they can be assigned. For example, someone who is an expert in ritual conveys its importance and instructs us in it in a special and memorable manner could be the master of ceremonies or the master of ritual. This is the earth element of the tradition. There are also the devotional and psychic aspects of the work. This person demonstrates to us the power of emotions, spiritual devotion, and prayer in our desire to grow. This is the master of arts, for devotions often express themselves artistically through music, poetry, song, crafts, writing, and visual formats. This is the water element of the tradition. Thirdly, we have the intellectual and academic training needed to train the mind to think clearly and reason properly along proper channels so as to come to useful and meaningful conclusions. This is the master of teachings, the air element of the tradition. Fourth, there is the inspirational teacher who reveals in often dangerous and no uncertain terms the nature of our work. Each of the previous teachers correct us, often gently so as not to bruise our fragile ego, whereas this master burns away our illusions and in his or her mercy holds nothing back. This is the master of illumination, the master of initiation, and is the fire element of our tradition. Our primary teacher embodies a part of all of these, and as such is the spirit or unifying aspect of the tradition as far as our personal work is concerned. If we bring the proper attitude to these teachers, they will stimulate their corresponding element in us, and we will be prepared for the arrival of the perfect master, the inner master, the HGA, which is nothing other than our own illuminated consciousness. So I'm going to read you the exercise, what he's talking about for spiritual gratitude. And this is really important. And after this, I'll leave you for the night. I won't go on forever and ever. See what you guys are talking about? Absolutely. Humbleness is a great part of what is needed. No great work can be achieved without taming the ego. Exactly. Let's see. Okay, so here's the practice of spiritual gratitude. Imagine your primary teacher before you and give heartfelt thanks for this teacher stimulating the spiritual current within you and starting you on this path. Number 2, do the same for the master of ceremonies or rituals for giving you proper guidance on the importance of ceremony, form, structure, and tradition. Do the same for the master of devotion for showing you how to take the material form and bring it to life. Then do the same for the master of teaching for showing you how all is connected and necessary and that the mind is the source of all being. Finally, thank the master of illumination for fearlessly burning away your iniquities, weaknesses, and faults and introducing you to the power of being. See them all together, merging into a sphere of golden light, and bask in that light for a while. So basically what he's saying is visualize your teachers. Imagine your teachers one at a time in your head. Your primary teacher, your main teacher, as well as all the other teachers that you've learned things from here and there. And as you picture each one, just express gratitude. Think that no matter if this person was human, if this person wasn't perfect, if this person did things that got on your nerves, but they still gave you something that allowed you to get further along this path, think of them and say thank you. Express gratitude for the fact that they gave you something or that you obtained something through them that allowed you to go to the next level of your development. After you've done it, each of them separately, see all of those teachers merge together into this brilliant golden sphere of energy, and just sit there with your eyes closed and feel all of that energy radiating into you, filling you up from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, completely filling your aura with the golden light of all of those teachers combined. And that is one of the exercises of how to use Kabbalah practically, in a practical way. We didn't get to some of the other things I was wanting to go into tonight. We're going to skip back and forth in here. We're going to go back towards the front a little bit, and we're going to talk, whenever we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the inner master, the HGA, and the significance of teachers. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, and then we're going to go into more things about, like, one of the things I wanted to do tonight, and we didn't quite get to it, is going to go into aligning yourself with planetary energies and the exercise that you do to do that. And that's really important because it will create amazing changes in your life. Let me see what you guys are talking about. I see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Angelica says, this talk is calling me out so hard. I'm realizing that spiritual gratitude begins with healthy boundaries. I've got some work to do. Jen is talking about how this year, 2021, if you add those numbers up, add up to 5. And the 5 tarot card is the Hierophant. Hierophant is a Greek word meaning high priest, who's the person who initiates you into the mystery. So this is the year that corresponds to the year of the high priest. No, Nika. Nika says, I recently became very interested in working with sound, but it seems like most resources on that topic are focusing on Eastern traditions. Can you recommend any books with a more magical approach? The only one, I've never really delved too deeply into sound. The only one that I would recommend is the one we just left behind, which is The Healer's Manual by Ted Andrews. He goes into there like how different musical notes correspond to different energies, and basically you can take a sound bath and bathe yourself in energies that correspond to each sound. But that's the only one I know of. It's not a topic that I've delved very deeply into. Okay, guys, it's 1 hour and 6 minutes. Hopefully, I will talk to you in a couple of days or so before I leave for New Orleans. I'm not 100% positive if I'm going to be able to or not, just because, let me think, we have 1 week. I've got 1 week left in New York. In 1 more week, 1 week from now, I'll be in New Orleans. Yeah, in this past week, I'm going to try as much as I can in between work and packing and, doing all these little things I have to do, like getting my cats vaccinated before they can be transported across country. So I'm dealing with a lot of like practical world stuff, but in between, I'm also trying to just like look around at the city and take it all in. And just like we experience gratitude for our teachers, our human teachers, this city has been one of the biggest teachers of my life. I have loved this city the way most people will only ever love another person. This city has been a guide, has been a teacher, has given me more than I could ever possibly begin to articulate. This city has been one of, if not the biggest teacher in my life. So I'm doing the same thing, which is try to look at it one last time with as much gratitude as I possibly can, and say goodbye to it before moving on to the place that is going to be home in the next leg of my journey. Okay, guys, I'm going to shut up for tonight. I hope you are doing well, and I'll talk to you in a few days. Bye-bye.